And now I would like to move on. I already used this metaphor of us being in the train and getting on and off at different stations. So the doors are closing and reopening. Maybe with Marilyn today offered us for a little pause, just a small breathe in, breathe out kind of thing. So perhaps that's what we can do is just take a deep, very deep breath in and breathe out, and enters a new hero of this session, the next session, who is Nick Graham, my longtime friend, co-founder of a group that we call the Weaving Lab, which is actually the group dedicated to the new models of leadership, exactly for the ecological civilization that Jeremy was just talking about. So how can we learn from nature to manifest ecological or ecosystemic leadership? Is that we need to act as nature, and that is through weaving and gardening. That's what nature does. Nick, and you are doing this, you are a master weaver. You're doing it with many communities, and now your time to weave in our next session, please.
Super. Thank you so much, dear Pavel, and great to be here. Lovely to see old friends and new friends as well. And welcome to those who are just new to this session, although I get the sense that most people have been here for a little bit of a while and are on this journey, on this train already. So yeah, thanks again, Pavel, for that intro. Some of the communities that I'm weaving are the Transformations community, which is a network of several thousand sustainability thought leaders and action researchers, the Weaving Lab, and also Now Partners, which is a network of regenerative businesses, such as those that Jeremy just shared. So Natura and Danone are significantly sized, and I hope that many more are following in that down that path. So I'm joined today by a stellar panel: Mila Popovic, Igor Birkin, Lars Lagrat, and Dave Pendle. And I'll let them introduce themselves much more eloquently than I ever could. But first, just a little framing for those who are actually new to this session, new to the day. So today really is about visions and goals. And given the polycrisis, what could be optimistic, inspiring pathways to reconnect with our dreams of futures, and what's the importance of hope? And what kind of operating systems are emerging? Jeremy hinted at that, and I think we can get into a lot more discussion around the new ways of thinking, doing, and being. This for me is transformations. And I say new, but actually often it can also be very old ways of being together. And the oldest being perhaps that we are all part of is Earth. So the idea of Earth as a system, as an intelligence, Gaia. This is comes from one of my geography heroes. That's my background, James Lovelock, and more recently Adam Frank. So how could the Earth process this intelligence? What could it dream for us? How are we part of that dream? And what are the provocations and inspirations and challenges? So lucid questions, that's the session for today. Lucid questions are these provocations and challenges that could potentially catalyze our evolution. Now, when I think of lucid questions, they might be questions without an answer, which reminds me very much of paradoxes. And I'm very much in love with paradoxes. I find there's great power in that tension. So paradox is not as binary in competition, but actually almost like a sporting dance that elevates both sides. So it's about that tension, those spaces in between, and between dreaming and waking. And lucid, wow, what a beautiful topic. Lucid dreaming is that delicious state of actively guiding your own dream like a movie director. And this is something that we can do with nature as well. Are we collective directors of our waking society? So an example of a lucid question was asked by Buckminster Fuller: how can we make the world work for all of humanity in the shortest amount of time? Through spontaneous cooperation without ecological offense or disadvantage. So that's the kind of question that this panel will explore. How do we discover these types of questions? How can we move from dreaming to acting by asking the right questions? How do we bridge into the future? And what does it mean to live the questions together? So I want to hand it over now to the panelists to introduce themselves and their work in relation to this topic. And perhaps if you're listening, you would like to type into the chat if you have a favorite lucid question that you have. And that question is for anyone who's listening. So with that, I'd like to introduce Mila. So you work in the intersection of many things in culture and leadership and government, and also physically situated at a cultural intersection, a crossroads in Montenegro. So I'm curious what kind of questions could drive this type of integration. Mila, tell us about you.
Thank you so much, Nick, and thank you all the wonderful friends. Special thank you to Pavel Luksha and the Global Education Futures, where we've been working together for a while. Katerina, who is the right hand and the spirit guide, I would think, in all of this. I am really happy to be here today with you. And all I have to say, and I could round off easily right here, is that it matters to stick together, to stand together, to show up together in the planetary agora these days. So that ends the speech and begins a little bit of insight. If you want me to introduce myself, the first thing that comes to my mind is that I'm an artist and a social artist who changes guises and costumes, but always shows up in the same values. In other words, I'm using different stages, different roles, different perspectives even, and positions and responsibilities in order to share the same values, visions, and this plea to humanity to really come together, because this is, everything hinges on that. And I really appreciate your introduction, Nick, when you mentioned this being and belonging, I think, because those are some of the guiding questions for my entire work. And I should respond, actually, I should reflect quickly on the possibility of an artist going into a government. I think that in and of itself is a big deal. And Montenegro is this tiny, ancient, beautiful country that I always call a lotus of its own, with deep, muddy historical roots and exceptional beauty and possibility, with one of the highest biodiversity indexes in the world, in Europe for sure, but in the world, as well as cultural diversity. And it's an incredible place. And one of the key figures in our history was a national poet, ruler, sacred ruler, patriarch, as well as local governance ruler, poet. So there's a interesting lineage in that country that is seeking higher connection, and one of his key monumental works is called The Ray of the Microcosm. And this is all connected into what we've discussed earlier, and the power of the microcosm and the potential of unleashing those powers of the microcosm in the moment. And again, that everything hinges, exactly as we have heard in the prior panels, everything hinges on unleashing that inner potential for collective growth, and to realize the consciousness that we are collectivity from within. We are what I always call being in superposition, multi-temporal, multi-dimensional, multivalent, and that we are collectivity from within, and if we have the principles and the values of that consciousness, we'll understand also how to relate and connect with others in a beneficial way. So the key questions, the guidelines for me that guided a certain vision and a dream that became true in the government of Montenegro, which is even for me hard to believe that a government wanted to innovate that big, is the question of being, belonging, and becoming. The full spectrum of human need to human aspiration. Meeting the human needs, creating conditions for human aspiration to be realized, and creating technologies of all kinds for every individual to design their own destiny. For me, it was clear that being was interbeing, that belonging had to be in belonging, and that becoming had to be co-evolving or co-becoming. And from there, after 25 years in the US and very difficult times during COVID, I moved following a calling, if you will, back to Montenegro, and had to stand there in a completely different, intense environment and ask, being in the Balkans that has been branded and stigmatized in certain way. I mean, as sticking still with the notion of balkanization, the ultimate atomization of the world. We have become, a label for that. I stood in the middle of Montenegro, who is like a linchpin in the Balkans that could be the safeguard of peace and cooperation and social cohesion, and asked there what I wanted to ask of the whole world, which is, what is still here, good, true, and beautiful? Even if you're standing in the rubbles of things, in the distresses of the day, what is still there universally good, true, and beautiful? What is there still that can be built in terms of ethical and aesthetical code to guide the people? Because not only does Montenegro, the Balkans, EU, and Europe, but the whole world needs a new story. It needs a new ethical and aesthetic code, because without a vision, a person without a vision is lost and in dis-ease, uncomfortable, in restlessness and pain, and let alone an entire species that keeps tugging at each other. So with that kind of question, with that kind of lucid dreaming, mind you, there are some precedents that I wanted to remind my people there of. I had to remind them of their goodness, of their truthfulness, of their beauty. They even used their smallness to absolve themselves of responsibility for their growth and evolution. And I didn't let them. At the same time, empowering their beauty, and at the same time, calling them to the responsibility to develop. And I walked into meetings and say, so what does Montenegro and life in it look like in 2100? And you took them, by surprise in some meetings, because they thought for a second there, will we exist? Or I'm not going to be alive, who cares? Very few eyes twinkled with curiosity and inspiration, but all of them were necessary to move fronts. The ones that were destitute or resigned, or the ones that were eager. The question is, how do you carry the energy of the entire collective, and who can carry it? Who can carry this? This is the core of many of the conversations I've had with Pavel and Alexander, Laszlo, and everybody else, dear friends. How do you sustain yourself to be the medium that can carry the double current of creation and transformation and change in the world? So these are some of the questions that we asked, and what we did. I cannot believe that out of the crises came an incredible opportunity in the government, and they said, when I proposed an office for the future, an independent scientific advisory connective body, they said, we are not able to do that right now, but you can create the Directorate for Interculturalism. That was my other proposition. That is actually the new cultural code for the future of Montenegro, in that sense, global future, that is cultivating the culture of interbeing, the fundamental consciousness and conscientiousness that all beings, all life forms, and all phenomena are interconnected and interdependent as unified truth, as both scientific and spiritual truth, as they're more and more coming closer together. So we started the Director of Interculturalism. I'd rather say interculture, but there was a reason for that. And because multiculturalism is a currency that we had to respond to and say, yes, we are all multicultural. Not only are we very rich in multiculturalism, but that's just a fact. That's a reality. Interculturalism is based on the culture of interbeing, of that consciousness, that truth, that goodness, that beauty of the greater design of us. Okay? And that it is now social awareness, social intention, and institutional strategy, because of the creation of a totally new institution that is now 1 year old. And guess what we did? We started working directly with youth, because they are the fastest to connect, and they are most honest still in their connection. They connect most easily and most authentically. And this is what we're trying to nurture. So these are some of the things that I wanted to bring to your attention, to what is possible. My goodness, it is possible. Especially, I had to always say, remember who you are. And this is the same calling to everybody on the earth. Remember who we are. As earlier in a panel, we were told that the future is past, it's behind us. And in this grand design, we need to remember, even in Montenegro, that somehow this unusual, unruly, freedom-fighting, freedom-loving Highlander space, in the middle of civil wars, proclaimed itself the first ecological state in 91. I had to say, speaking of lucid dreaming, making it real, how practical that idealism is, and how deeply healing, deeply valuable, and value-generating higher values are. And also during civil wars, to be the space where we received refugees. It's very important that I mention this, especially with what's going on in the world now. We received refugees for 4 or 5 warring sides. Unthinkable. 25% of this tiny country, the size of Kentucky, and 700,000 people inside, and in diaspora about 1 million, received 25% and took care of them truly in every way. Were the refugees. So it's possible, and I keep trying to remember myself there with them, what's possible, and to be that voice from Montenegro now globally, and recently took it to the UN in the conversations to see how we can put this culture of interbeing center stage at the UN Summit of the Future. Because we even globally don't have, even with the SDGs, a development model. So when we say plan, what is our joint shared values development model on the global plane?
Thank you, Mila. That's a beautiful question to start to weave in some of the other panelists as well. And I think you brought up so many great points that we can dive into together, interbe together, interconnect. And I think the artistic expression of this is one of the most fundamentally powerful tools that we have. We're storytellers, right? So,
Nick, if you don't mind, I would love to share just a couple of images to really visualize what if I can share the screen.
Sure. Do you have access? Can you do that?
This is all I need. I will show you a couple of screens, even the poster itself, will be speaking tons. I think this is all I wanted for you to see, that we put the God's Eye Nebula in the forefront and the beauty of the microcosm next to it. And in the circle, it says New Cultural Code for the Future of Montenegro. And we placed it at the Ministry of Human and Minority Rights for very precise reasons, of which we can talk later. But I wanted to show you that it's universal values and rights for the new culture, for the future of everybody, you name it. You can put any country, all of us together here. And this is my key. It's these two people, the youth and their creations and their artistic expression that they shared of who they are, their visions, their lucid dreams on their terms. That's what we made possible. And the key that mobilizing 1.8 billion youngsters holds the key in this human connection. So this is what I wanted to just share quickly, and to give you a sense of how far we took it. We speak of a tiny country, but we speak really in planetary cosmic terms as the ray of the microcosm.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much. It's very helpful to see those images. And yeah, we'd love to connect more into that fractal idea, the microcosm idea. But wanted to introduce Lars next. And perhaps, Lars, if you could tell us about your work and your journey from chaos to emergence, and perhaps what kind of conditions help us to question lucidly. Lars.
I built some organizations called Emergence. Before that, part of forming an organization in Denmark called the Chaos Pilots, which is new paradigm entrepreneurship leadership. So what we did in the mid of the 90s is that we had a school in Denmark and one in San Francisco and one in South Africa. And why I think it's important is that cross-cultural dialogue about how empower youth is quite interesting, because there were very different experiences in the apartheid, post-apartheid area of South Africa and the entrepreneurial period in San Francisco and the solidaric Nordic societies. But what really interests me is that many years ago, maybe 30 years ago, I read about the phrase emergence, and it was actually a biologist called Lloyd Morgan, and he talked about how ants that came from different colonies would start to fight, but if you took them and shake them together, they'll start to build incredible constructions together. And that gave me an image of our human civilization. How is it that when we have this incredible potential as human beings, this divine light, we are basically incredibly good if we are treated beautifully from we are born? How is it that we have created systems that suppress in the way it does? That have always puzzled me. How is it that this incredible creature that can collaborate and create so beautiful things, have so much inner beauty, choose to serve a system that is, in my way of phrasing, I would say the system that we have today, if it was a person, it would be a psychopath. So that puzzles me a lot. And what I came about is that the two most powerful things we have to weave that new story and those new connections between people is questions and dialogues. And what we need is that we need to find ways to have people to gather around the most important questions and have dialogue around it. And then we are natural creative creatures. We can create things, explore things, and find amazing solutions together because we are so creative. And then we put our small children into institutions that take all that shit away, as all of us know, right? And then we are forced to adopt a system that is, first it was worn out the market economy, but it's basically the same logic. How do we steal from other people into creating wealth for the few, right? And one of the tools was to create the Emergent School of Leadership. And what we did there was that it was based on two questions. Who is myself and what is my work? Which means, who am I here to be and what am I here to do? And then everything was evolved around that. And the students were PhD students, master students, bachelor students, young entrepreneurs, all put together on this common journey, because that will create this cross-cultural team experience of having to adjust and listen to each other, which is something that we deeply, deeply need. So that have been the longest and the most interesting experiment. So my thing is basically how my questions center around how can we break the spell of having this gorgeous divine creatures, human beings, choose to live a life where we allow ourselves to be suppressed. Like Daniel Spachtenberger uses examples of Nazi Germany, right? A few leaders can manipulate so many people to do something that afterwards they don't understand how they were actually able to do such evil, right? But we have that in our systems every day.
Thank you, Lars. Yeah, this is the question that we're all sitting with. And you were saying something about listening, but I wasn't listening. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. Sorry. Sorry. We'll definitely get back into that. I think listening is really one of the keys that can unlock this, and deep listening and generative listening as well in dialogue rather than debate. So thank you for bringing those provocations, those questions to us.
I could say one last thing. One of my biggest inspirators have been training Qigong, advanced Qigong for 30 years. And in that class, everybody's having a master class, because if you're a beginner, you train with people that are trained for 5 years, and you train with people that are trained for 30 years. So it's about that you tap into the knowledge at the level where you are. But everybody serves from being in the same field. You learn a lot from giving, but you also learn a lot from receiving, right? And that's a beautiful model of how we could create our democracies as well.
Yeah.
That everybody is welcome, and it's a privilege to be more advanced, because then you can give more, and in that way you actually receive more.
That's been very much alive in me as well. And I was also triggered by Mila's question around how can we support each other in this, because or supporting ourselves and actually supporting others can be nourishing. Then it's about finding those boundaries.
That practice is all about listening, right? How do you listen to Earth, the universe, to yourself? How do you become nothingness and deep silence, and listen deeply into reality? That's the essence of that thing. So that's the core of my practice. That's for a couple of hours every day, just to answer to your listening question.
Indeed. And maybe there is nothing to be solved in silence. And maybe it's interesting to listen to our bodies as well. I think that's an interesting thing, because the body doesn't lie. And I wonder go ahead.
And it leads to something really profound, that we need to reconnect the youth to their bodies and to themselves in these kind of practices that a lot of people have pointed to today, right? They need to go deeply inside and deeply listen, because that will empower them into to embrace the paradigm shifts that we're all talking about.
Absolutely. And I wonder if the panel have some thoughts on what are the conditions for fostering more listening. But I wanted to pass the microphone to Igor now to introduce himself, and everyone can have a little introduction. Igor, in your spiritual work, and what are the ways of thinking and questioning that you see helping, especially in such traumatic times of tension that you're living in right now? We are all living in, but yeah, please tell us about you.
Yeah, I live in a little bit more than you, probably.
Yeah.
Okay, so hello, Nick. Hello, everyone. And can you hear that? Can you hear that? Yeah, it's a fighter jet. I'm in Israel, just for letting you know. And I'm sorry, I cannot mute it. Maybe you don't hear it because I have filtering here, but I hear fighter jet. It's a bit I cannot mute it. So, my field of interest is not really in the content of dreams, but more like in the matter of dreams. And the lucid question, I like this this expression. The lucid question in this context could be, what are our dreams made of? And this is not a poetic metaphor. But how do our dreams arise in us? How do they manifest? How can we perceive our dreams? When we know our dreams, how do we know that? And whatever our dream is, if you really go deep into the nature of these dreams, and we really discover how dreams arise, and it is something similar to how reflections are appearing in the mirror, then we discover that dreams are illusions. Then we discover that they have no essence. They have a power to delude us, and we believe our dreams. We believe the illusions, basically. And my field of work is about going beyond illusions, disillusioning, understanding the nature of dreams. And in this context, for example, Nick, you mentioned lucid dreaming, but the ultimate phase of lucid dreaming is go beyond dreams. Just all dreams are exhausted. And when all dreams are exhausted, literally dreams, not dreams like we are dreaming something, but dreams that we have dreams in the night. When they are exhausted, that we remain just in light. No good dreams, no bad dreams, but we just remain in light of our consciousness without any particular content of the dreams. And I don't really know if we need to have a common dream, because we already have one. Our common dream that we all share and that we consider real. And I'm interested to go beyond that. I'm interested to go beyond this illusion. And I think this is something important for people, to discover our limitations, our own limitations, to discover our delusions, to discover that our dreams are created by our tensions and our neuroses. Our dreams are created by our panic. Even the dreams, beautiful dreams and best dreams, but they are created also by fear. And in the context of what I'm practicing and what I'm teaching, then we try to go beyond hope and fear, both, because we cannot have hope without fear. It's not possible to have hope without fear. And this is, I think, is important, that we find a way to discover, not through thinking, and also not through dialogue, because dialogue, we have our dialogue on the level of dreams. With the dialogue, we don't go beyond dreams. But somehow we can find ways to go beyond dreams, to go beyond illusions. Because all beautiful dreams, in the end, they end with blood. Because there are always some people who do not want to share your dreams. And then what are we going to do with those people who don't want to share our dreams, who oppose to our dreams? What are we going to do with them? How are we going to change them? And why do we take this position of authority to change our other people's dreams? And you know that I'm in Israel now, yeah. But before Israel, I lived in the Ukraine. And why did I leave the Ukraine? Because of the dream. Because of the dream of some people, not because of my dream. Because there were some people who wanted to live in European Union, for example. And there were people who didn't want. But people who did want to live in the European Union declared those people who didn't want, they declared them Untermensch. And then the civil war started 9 years ago. And I didn't fit to the dream which dominated there. And I had to leave. And now I'm in Israel. And Israel is a country, beautiful country. It was created by dreamers. Dreamers like Ben-Gurion, Herzl, etc. They had a dream for the home of Jewish nation. But when they were pursuing their dream, they didn't care about feelings of other people who already lived here. And that created a conflict. And nowadays, people who are attacking Israel, they also have a dream. And they feel their dream is good. Their dream is to establish Islam as the only religion on earth. And they don't care about other people's feelings. So I think that dreams are dangerous. And I think that it's very important to discover how we are deluded by our dreams. Okay.
Yes, indeed. I think that's the core essence of Bucky's question is how can we have thriving futures for all life rather than just some? It's the, what's the circle of care? Where do you draw the line? So yeah, how can we be in service to life? And yeah, I'm very curious how we live that question. But I wanted to make sure that we introduce Dave Pendle before we have a couple of minutes for the panelists to share their thoughts on what they've heard. So Dave, yeah, please share how your work connects to this session. And yeah, you're a generative question guru, and I'm very curious, what's your favorite question? We can't hear you.
I resonated a lot with what Lars was saying, particularly around, I would say, the kind of microcosm of who am I and how should I live? Those are the core existential questions. And that leads to a well-observed and a well-lived life if it's pursued sincerely with heart and vision and over time. And one of the products in my own life is I find that I'm actually more interested in the inquiry than I am in the result. So one of the things I lead is something called generative conversations. I bring people together to talk about, I would say, life-defining topics. So generative questions take you into source. So they're infinite. So a generative question, like a paradox, like you were saying, or Buckminster Fuller's civilization question, they need reinterrogation. They need revisiting. And actually the joy of the revisiting, the new insight, the new kernel of knowledge or wisdom that arises out of regular contemplation, that can lead a life somewhere towards the good and the true and the beautiful that Mila was talking about. Or it takes us into these questions that she was also mentioning about being, belonging and becoming. So by stripping away, in the way that Igor was talking about, our kind of egoistic relationship, self-centered relationship to life, and dropping those dreams of personal glory, as it were, and diving into the question and giving one's life to the question results in kind of entering the kind of coreness of our humanity in the way that Lars was talking about, practicing going into nothingness. At the core is nothingness. But I also would like to promote my own dream of my own leadership, and my own generative leadership is to have cohorts of people, like in this forum, that are dreaming the dream of the earth, that together with others dream and can tune in to the dream of the earth's natural intelligence. We are actually all passing through here, and we're temporary, and we have a very short span of time on the planet. So how can groups of conscious, aware people formulate these kind of life-defining questions and inquire into the value of our own existence and penetrate to these deep cosmic truths that Jude was talking about, that Mila's just alluded to, that Lars was just outlining in his own approach? How can we share these questions? So how can we have a civilization that's informed by our natural Earth's intelligence? Or how can we prioritize being, belonging, becoming as the keystone pillars of our culture? So I'll just responding to what I've heard, and I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Dave. And at this point, I would just welcome any of the panelists, if you have something that's alive in you right now that you'd like to respond to. So open mic time. We've got about maybe 10 minutes left. So yeah, the question that that I'm sitting with is, how do we live these questions? We all have slightly different questions. I think we're all fairly aligned in the shared vision. And I come from a background of seeking answers in our Western culture. And so this concept of living the questions was quite a challenge. And I'm curious if that has any resonance with you, or if there was something that you heard that you would like to respond to. Yeah. Dave.
Yeah, I think I'd add to what I said earlier. This pursuit of question needs a kind of deep relaxation. Neurosis, which I have a lot, is full of neurotic questions. Where am I going? What am I doing? So as a way, how can we distinguish in our thought stream those questions that serve us, that serve our higher potential, as not Irvin, Alexander was saying, what is our highest potential? What are the questions that serve our highest potential? And some of that skill to do that arises out of becoming still, of being still and becoming still. Without the stillness, you can't discern what questions or thoughts are useful and not. So somehow diving into stillness and having a relationship with that essence of nothingness allows the ability to discern what's helpful and what's not. And by following the thread of the question that gives energy, it starts to inform the passion of inquiry, of what not knowing and wanting to know becomes a lodestone for one's engagement throughout one's whole life.
Yeah, indeed. And I wanted to bring in Igor maybe, as we were talking about this dissolving the illusion of control, or the illusion of our dreams. And I wondered if there was a moment that helped you in this understanding and in this feeling, or if you've seen a kind of transformation in other people that stepping into this way of being. Yeah, I'm curious if you have anything more that you'd like to add on that, or if you have other questions.
Yeah, of course, I can see people who have deep experience, and they become more relaxed in general about life, and more relaxed in the difficult situations. And I think at least this is a good result. And but I don't really want to talk much about this, because there are things that cannot be conveyed by talking. But if you like, I can give you a very, very simple exercise that would take maybe 1 minute. Would you like to do? Okay.
What do we think? Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, great. That's fun. Now we're going to have some fun. So just think about who you are, whatever, the narrative of your life, as if you were reading a book about yourself. Yeah? And you have a general idea about the protagonist, who protagonist is. Not all details, but general idea. So just refresh in your mind who you are in all senses. What is your age? What is your gender? What are your preferences? What is your name? What is your nationality? What are your roles, whether you're employee or employer, whether you're like father or kid or mother or whatever, all your roles, just in general, very, very general picture of who you are. Just refresh it for a moment in your memory and see how it looks, this idea about yourselves. And when this idea is active and present in your mind, imagine an enormous flash of light, enormous, which is just eliminating, overshadowing this idea about who you are, totally. with no trace remaining, just flash of light. And if something kicks in back, then just make another flash of light. Yeah. And then, how do you feel when you're not anyone, when you're not anything? How do you feel?
Free.
Free. Yeah.
Okay. This is just a glimpse of what can be done.
Thank you, Igor. Yeah, Mila, how do you feel?
The unbearable lightness of being, right? Thank you, Igor. I mean, and thank you all because we are co-creating the feel of how you feel. And I want to bring into the focus exactly that question. That is the lucid question, and I'll explain why. The question is following. What does being human feel like in 2100? And this is why I asked that question. Working on the full scale with Igor for flushing us down, liberating us to feel that lightness, to feel that universality, because the deeper you go into the personal, the more universal being you become. That's another paradox that we need to constantly think about so that we go take people deeper within themselves in order to develop their empathetic intelligence and capacity. Now, full-scale working with Igor from liberating ourselves, and then in the double current of creation and solution finding and thinking and feeling together, I'm looking back at the everyday situations in the world, in the new economy that is already coming, with the new technologies coming, and I'll just paint quickly that picture for you. I would like to, if you don't mind, show you an image because it is about dreaming. I think this would be really, really, if I can share, hopefully I can find it in a minute, but I want to show you a man who's dreaming and other people coloring his dreams. And that has been done 20 years ago. I think it's important that we see this. The glory of technology and the challenge, should I call it, or the scare of technology. The future of technology is the post-information age where we are merging with, I cannot call it artificial intelligence, but machine learning, right? And this is a process whereby we are not only cyborgs, but also our environment is smart. My environment is sensible and intelligent. That kind of full merging of the human and the mechanistic or the machine or externalized intelligence of the humanity, right? That superhuman becomes singularity. And the interesting thing is, for the new economy to be realized, it's going to need the participation of all of us, because AI's capacity of 4 billion minds harvested, as opposed to 9 billion, is of course a simple math. But the ultimate math of AI and singularity is exponential. But it'll want to get the information. We got a taste of that from, say, Facebook or social media, where our information, our images have been, likes or dislikes, voting have been harvested. Now it will be our personalities. Our dreams will be harvested. All of your qualia will be harvested, which means your subjective experience of the world will be your greatest riches. That is the new resource of the new economy. Because the artificial intelligence, that is collective intelligence, put in the processors and multiplied and sent back to us, mirroring what we talked about before. So what we are scared of in the mirror is ourselves and our capacity for destruction or evolution. What it will do, it will want the greatest diversity. It will want the greatest inclusivity. So one of the paradoxes I want to look at with you, what could be the dark side or the problematic side of harvesting as many people as possible into that singularity, and on whose terms, where are the human rights and where is the universal values. So the basis of the new economy is harvesting of the qualia, which is your dreams, your fantasies, your fears, your memories, your creations, your imagination, your everything, your personality. That is the new resource. And being able to explore another, to know another, as we have biblically started to think about that, is to be able to explore another's inner landscape. So the aesthetic states of one person will be the new real estate. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to show a picture to you of something that has happened. I don't know, are you able to see this?
Not yet.
I really need you to see this. This is remarkable image, and this is a remarkable, let me see if I can find, here it is.
Yeah.
Right. I'm just going to leave it on the screen. I'm not going to read everything. You can have it for your referral. This was 20 years ago, and the foundation for the rights of this cyborg has been created in 2010 already, with a lot of investment into it. And look at the possibility. He has given access to 5 people to color his dreams. I mean, isn't this the dream of unity realized? And isn't this one of the scariest things as well, if you do not educate people on their rights, and if you do not come up with a joint and shared and agreed upon ethical and aesthetical code? So my question is, in the post-information era, in the era of the conscious technologies, what we will need to know and to cherish is that unity, is the uniqueness of an individual, is the universal sharing and the universal needs and aspirations. And more than anything, we're going to nurture the culture of intimacy through interbeing. Because what information age did to our attention, the conscious technology era will do to our intimacy. And this is why the culture of interbeing, and this is why the empathy, and this is why the bonding, because that will be the most precious thing that we have, and it might be the source of deriving the social contract that might guide the rules, regulations, and codes and standards for engaging each other this way. So thinking in paradoxes and thinking ahead in the era of experiential technologies, the key question will be, what do we want to feel like as humans in 2100?
What a beautiful question. Yeah, and for all of those science fiction fans out there, well, it's really happening, isn't it? The future is here. Yeah, and I'm curious if if Lars, you have any reflections on that, or if there's anything you would like to add to the conversation. We've got just 5 minutes left, and in general, I wanted to end this beautiful conversation on the question: how might we sustain networks of hope? But first of all, just handing the microphone to Lars for any thoughts.
Networks of hope. One thing that comes to mind in a different direction. I had a project for a while talking to 7-year-olds. It's incredible how precise they can describe how we should handle our problems today. Right? They know everything. If you owe a month, which was the period I spent in my summer house where these beings were assembled, and they know all the answers to what we do to the sea with plastics, with people that are poor, people that are rich, due to the forest. And then we send people to Harvard, and then they can't find the fucking solutions anymore. Isn't it interesting? So we have this natural intelligence, 7-year-olds, they have all the answers. They are willing to go into deep spiritual questions. They're willing to close their eyes to go into meditation. They can do Qigong, they can be one with nature, they can play, they can do all these beautiful things. And then we send them into the best, so-called best elite institutions, and they forget everything, right? And they are part of creating this enormous oppressive systems. It's impossible.
Yeah, the instance that, sorry, I was just typing away, trying to find the link to Designathon Works, which is a wonderful example of taking kids through design thinking to address the wicked challenges of our time. And this is 7-year-olds, this is teenagers, and they do come up with fabulous solutions. And it is a wonderful hope-giving network. So I'll share that in the chat in a moment.
So what I just wanted to say is that, to end on a high note, the core of human nature, if you're not destroying it, is what fills me with hope and joy, and this is what this is all about, because it's so incredibly beautiful. So we have everything we need, to not just need to nurture it the right way.
And I would like to root for deeper faith, for just this incredible courage of conviction, because hope can be very seductive and keep you at a low grade level of expectation. And courage and faith, just the knowing what you are made of, what you are made for, and that you are made for these times. We are made for these times. We are made to take on this task and the battle and the accomplishment of it.
I get a feeling of trust when I listen to you. That's really what comes up for me, and I'm very curious to explore these things, such as the economy of love, and who do we trust in this age of post-information. Dave, I trust you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think I'd just echo what Mila said. There's something about the focus of how can I live a life of grace and dignity in times of collapse and be an example of the universal beauty and goodness that sits at the core of life. How can I exemplify that wherever I am and whatever I'm doing?
Yeah, how can we do this together?
Big hug.
Yeah.
That was just perfect.
Digital hugs. And Igor, closing words from your good self.
Well, I basically have nothing to say.
How about we have 30 seconds of silence then from Igor, and we all enjoy that.
Okay. Then just sit comfortably and discover, how do you feel when everything is accomplished, when there is no more problem to solve? How do you feel right now?
I have an answer. I feel deeply moved and deep gratitude for sharing this space with all of you. I had a very physical, visceral expression of that as I was sitting in that silence. So thank you to everyone on the panel, and thank you to Pavel and your team for hosting this wonderful exploration and forum. Over to you, Pavel. Much love.
Thank you, Nick, for great guidance. And Igor, my goodness.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks to the audience, too.
And thank you, Igor, for bringing in the jet fighter to remind us that we are in the world where this is happening right now.
Yes. I hope you won't be close to that, as close as I am.
Yeah, and I was mentioning my friends who first were living in Ukraine or in Russia and had to leave it because of the circumstances that are happening, and now found themselves in Israel again in circumstances that they were trying to evade. And that's perhaps another illustration of what you are teaching people. You cannot evade.
No, you cannot escape. You cannot. You cannot really. Life is impermanent, and one of the questions we can ask, but I'm going to die, but how am I going to die?
A favorite question. Nick asked about favorite questions. And that is one of them. Well, thank you very much, everyone. And while sitting in this space for a little, which Igor offered to us, the space of, or the place where all the problems are solved, I reached out to two feelings, so kind of for two states of being. And one of them is a state of contemplation, state of balance, the state of universe flowing through me. But perhaps the other state, as the other one, is that state where things emerge, where creation begins to happen. Sorry. And I think we as humans manifest both. So we are. Sorry, just I feel that Anastasia needs to be muted. So what I want to express is that the process that we are going through here takes us into the next exploration. And that next exploration is, I mentioned already this metaphor of the train. We are approaching the last station of the of the tube line today. And that last station is actually a co-creative session. And this co-creative session we are going to hold today is about actually discovering the potential for our shared goals or shared guiding principles. And I know this has been quite a long journey for many of you being on this train since the beginning of our session, so it's already a few hours. And we won't keep this last session too long, but I'm going to invite my co-hosts of this last session, Alexander Laszlo and Sergei Dolgov. Why we are holding this conversation now, because we feel that there are many beautiful visions that are present now in the world. Although Igor has also pointed that these visions could be our ways of, let's say, creating detachments from what is happening now, or illusionary, let's say, visions that are not really creating that reality that we want to bring into, which is brought to us, so to say. But discovering how we can move together as human species, the reason why we wanted to explore questions as lucid questions is actually because we need new techniques of discovering together our collective journeys, so to say. And a 20th century approach to identifying these shared, let's say, journeys was about setting goals, setting some point, for example, on the map, which we need to reach in our journey, or setting up some target that we as managers need to achieve in one quarter, or as sportsmen, we need to achieve such and such time by running the track of 100 meters. So this is a goal-based approach that has been evolving in the last 100 years, but perhaps a few thousand years of the present civilization. But we recognize that this approach might be limited when we deal with an open-ended process of collective transformation. When we step into transition to spaces that are not yet known. And that is what we have been discussing today. How do we move to the different level of consciousness, manifest our connection with Gaia and reconnection to Earth and to natural systems? How do we make peace with each other? We are stepping into the unknown in many regards. And that doesn't allow us to set clear targets. It only allows us to set questions to be explored together. That is the inspiration for something that we tentatively call evolutionary development goals, recognizing that we still have development goals. It's goals, nevertheless. So maybe we should call them guiding principles or something else. But the idea of having something that would help us have some sense of direction, have some unity moving along the way without constraining us, as many of these existing systems do, but inviting us into that shared journey. And what could that way of organizing these collective evolutionary development goals could be? That is the essence of our last session for today, which will not be too long. So we will first share our thinking with you and then invite you into sharing your thinking. So I would like to pass now word to Alexander for his introduction to this session, and then we will invite Sergey to share some of our early thinking about it, and then we pass it over to you. Alexander.
Thank you so much. And, you know, I mean, all that we are expressing here is so far beyond the thinking. This is what we human beings, Homo sapiens sapiens, do so much of. And this, as Ervin said earlier, it's what's gotten us into so much trouble. Trying to be overly rational, trying to figure it all out. Even what we just now heard in the last panel with Nick and company, this grasping for the control of our own destinies, the control of life. This is something that we heard from Jeremy Lent as well. This is part of the problem. So how do we sense into what is emerging? How is this potential for reaching into the liminal spaces of possibility, right? And this is what we're also coming to beautifully through our explorations in the sciences and our learnings from quantum mechanics, field theory, and even also at the highest level. And Pavel, your speaker is on, so we hear you typing, just so you know. And sure. And so reaching into the levels of how does the universe itself organize itself at the highest levels, at the supra galactic levels, at the levels of the galactic clusters and the superclusters, we see patterns emerging. This is something that Ervin mentioned. This holotropic movement, this movement towards coherence. And I think this is what we've been looking at throughout this whole time here so far, and this is day 1 of 3 days, is how do we engage with these patterns of coherence? How are we ourselves patterning this coherence? And I think it comes also to, and this is why I want to get to the evolution development goals, but I'm bringing us to this because it involves, in a way, sourcing, connecting to source. Jude Carvin mentioned this, Ervin mentioned this. Many people have talked about how source truly is. In different ways we can express it, but it's how the universe appears to be made of matter and energy, but secretly it is made of love. Now, what a fun expression, you know, but what does that mean? Love, coherence, non-duality, unity narrative. This is not romanticizing the dynamics of emergence. It's actually giving ourselves into and over to the power of this particular dream of the earth. This is part of the earth's dream of coherence, of harmony. You look at the world around us in its natural states, and it is verdant, it is abundant, it is teeming with life. Life creates conditions conducive to life. This is what Janine Beanius, one of the founders of biomimicry, says: life creates conditions conducive to life. So how the heck are we doing that, human beings? We just we heard Igor hearing the fighter jets over him. This is happening now. How are we creating conditions conducive to life? So the goals that we set for ourselves, when we set these, the United Nations set out these goals, the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 goals, and Sergey is going to help us look at these and see how we have set ourselves goals that are kind of static. They're not living. How do they help us live and thrive? Thomas Bjorkman and others have gone through the inner development goals to not just say, okay, we have to deal with the poverty out there, the education problems out there, and all this stuff happening out there. But what about ourselves? With so many people today have talked about, it starts with inner development challenges. So Thomas Bjorkman and others have developed these inner development goals. Fantastic. And yet, where is the synergy? Where is the aliveness? Where is the systems interrelatedness, the Ubuntu, the interdependence that we've talked about among these goals? So even the framing in terms of goals, I think Sergey is going to share with us a little bit about how this can be problematic. It's very Western to have our goals and to try to get someplace and achieve them, as if we're going to achieve these goals. How do we have evolutionary development goals that change with us as we change and as our global challenges change as well? So I think this is part of being sourcing the ineffable, right? Of what is seeking to emerge, listening into the dream of the earth, listening for deliciousness. What is delicious in this dream? How do we foster that? How do we cultivate and curate that? And we know within ourselves what is life-giving, future-creating, opportunity increasing. We know. How can we foster that as gardeners, as Pavel talks about being gardeners of this potential? So this is where we're looking towards the establishment of evolutionary development goals in the framework that Ervin was presenting as evolution being that highest narrative of the love story of our cosmos, right? And Connie Baxter and others have been talking about this in beautiful ways for many, many years. So back to you, Pavel, if you want to take it over or pass it to Sergey, I'll pass it to you.